My son turned 10 last week. We decorated, cooked, sat waiting all day. Not one family member showed up. A week later, my mom texted, $1-800 each for your sister's dream wedding in Santorini. Venmo me. No apology. So I quietly booked that same resort for a family trip 1 week before theirs. 2 days later, she called screaming. My family didn't scream, they bled you dry with a smile. The moment I saw my own aunt and cousin try to dismantle everything my mother had, I knew the quiet kid everyone dismissed had to become a weapon. For most of my life, I was just Ethan. The youngest of 3, a computer science student, the kind of guy who fixed everyone's Wi-Fi. My brother, Lucas, 3 years older, was in logistics. Then there was Brandon, my cousin. Technically, Aunt Diane's son, but he'd always been around, a constant, irritating presence, like smoke seeping under doors. My mom and Aunt Diane were sisters. Mom always tried to keep the peace, despite their old arguments. That meant Diane and Brandon were always at family dinners, birthdays, even vacations. I never really got it. Diane had a way of taking up too much space, her opinions filling a room before she even spoke. And Brandon? He was the golden boy, charming, tall, and a complete parasite wrapped in designer cologne. The first real crack happened at my high school graduation. I wasn't expecting fireworks. I had good grades, a few academic awards, nothing wild. But as I stepped off the stage, diploma in hand, I saw it, my family clapping, except Aunt Diane. She leaned over to Brandon with a smirk. I caught the eye roll. It shouldn't have stung, but it did. Later that night, she gave me a thin-lipped smile. Well, at least you're good with computers. That's something. It sounded like a compliment, but it felt like a jab. I tried to shake it off, told myself she just didn't know how to talk to people. But then, little things started adding up. At gatherings, she'd interrupt me mid-sentence, or switch topics the second I joined a conversation. If I mentioned my software firm internship, she'd immediately pivot to Brendan's vague business ventures, which always sounded suspiciously like, I know a guy who's starting something big. Brandon would nod, add a line about early investments, and the adults would just eat it up. He wore ambition like a tailored suit, despite never actually doing anything. Meanwhile, I was studying, coding, building projects, and working part-time at my Uncle David's accounting firm to pay for school. But to Aunt Diane, Brandon was the next big thing, and I was just good with tech. Brandon treated me like I was 12. He'd ruffle my hair, which I hated, or call me the kid in front of everyone. I was 5 inches taller than him by then, but it didn't matter. I remember one 4th of July barbecue. I brought homemade raspberry lemonade I'd been experimenting with. Everyone seemed to like it, but when someone asked who made it, Brandon quipped, probably the same guy who still thinks raspberry pie is food. Everyone laughed. I smiled too, but it stuck with me. Not the stupid joke. It was how quickly people laughed at me, not with me. Like I was the harmless background character in our family sitcom. Still, I kept showing up. I told myself it was just part of being the quiet one. I was helping Uncle David at the accounting office, learning the ropes, balancing school and freelance web design. I didn't mind the work. Numbers made sense. People didn't. But I liked Uncle David. He wasn't loud or showy. He taught me things without making me feel indebted. Around that time, Mom started hinting she might retire early. She'd worked for the state for almost 30 years, and the stress was catching up. Lucas was doing well, steady job, thinking about buying a condo. That left me, still in school, still coding late nights. I didn't mind carrying more weight if it meant Mom could finally rest. But I should have known someone else would notice, someone who never lifted a finger unless it was to point blame. About 2 weeks after my 20th birthday, Mom called a family dinner. Just the core group, me, her, Lucas, Aunt Diane, and Brandon. I didn't think much of it then, figuring it was about her retirement plans. She cooked one of her best spreads: baked chicken, roasted vegetables, garlic mashed potatoes, comfort food. It was too quiet at first, the kind of quiet that stretches like a rubber band just before it snaps. Halfway through dinner, Mom cleared her throat. "There's something I need to tell you all," she said gently. "I'm stepping down at the end of the quarter. Retirement came a bit sooner than I planned, but it's time." Lucas smiled, supportive as always. Brendan made a show of raising his glass like he was toasting a CEO. But Aunt Diane just pursed her lips. "That's sudden," she said, dabbing her mouth. "I hope you've planned for it." "I have," Mom replied. "Ethan's been helping with the finances. He's smarter than I am with all that." Diane hummed, eyes darting to me. "Well, I hope he's not getting too involved in things beyond his age. You know how young people can be." It was subtle, a throwaway line, but it hit me like a punch. I looked at Mom. She didn't flinch. "He's capable," Mom said calmly. "And trustworthy." That was the first time I saw it, a flicker, a tight little twitch at the corner of Aunt Diane's eye. She wasn't worried about me making a mistake. She was worried I had access to something she couldn't touch. Later that night, after everyone left, I helped Mom with the dishes. She was quiet, hands moving slowly, her mind elsewhere. I couldn't shake the feeling that dinner had been a test, or maybe a warning. "Did something happen?" I asked. She paused, then gave me a tired smile. "Just keep your eyes open, okay?" She didn't say anything else, but I felt it. Something was coming. Something that smelled like smoke under a closed door. And I wasn't sure yet who had lit the match. The signs weren't obvious at first, like a squeaky floorboard you only notice when the house is silent. But once Mom said, "Keep your eyes open," I did. And suddenly, I couldn't unsee it. The way Aunt Diane's tone shifted when talking about money, the questions she asked that didn't sound like small talk anymore. "So, how's work at the office? You must see a lot of private info doing what you do, huh? You think Ethan's a little young to be dealing with all those numbers?" Always dressed up in a casual voice, like she was just making conversation, but her eyes were sharp, searching. At first, I thought maybe I was being paranoid. I didn't want to jump to conclusions. But then one afternoon, I got to the accounting office early and caught the tail end of a conversation between Aunt Diane and Uncle David. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop. I just froze at the door when I heard her voice. She was in his office, the door cracked slightly. "I'm just saying," she said, "he's what, 20? Kids make mistakes and he's handling sensitive financials. One misclick and that could be thousands gone. You wouldn't want something like that traced back to your firm, would you?" My stomach sank. Uncle David didn't say much, he'd always been a quiet guy. But I heard the uncomfortable pause. Then he said, "Ethan's been very thorough, more than most of the new hires I've had." "I'm sure," she replied, a little too sweetly. "Just looking out for family. You know how it is." I slipped away before she saw me and spent the rest of the day pretending I hadn't heard anything. But it stuck in my chest like a splinter. She wasn't just trying to undermine me. She was planting seeds, getting people to doubt me. Why? It didn't take long to find out. A week later, I was helping Mom organize some old boxes in the garage when I found an envelope with an unfamiliar letterhead, Foxwell Trust Holdings. Inside was a brief professional letter confirming the disbursement of funds from a family trust account addressed to my mom. It said she had opted to split a significant portion between herself, Aunt Diane, and Uncle David. A decision made over a decade ago, back when Grandpa passed away and they were settling his affairs. I didn't know there was a trust. I didn't know Mom had any real money tucked away. She'd always been frugal, coupon clipping, thrift stores, saving electricity like it was gold. I asked her about it, and she just sighed. "It wasn't much," she said. "Your grandfather left what he could." Your aunt got her share, David, too. I left mine alone. Figured it'd be for you and Lucas someday. She paused, then added, that's why Diane's been circling. And just like that, the pieces started clicking. Diane wasn't just fishing for gossip. She was trying to figure out if there was still money left, if I had access to it, if I could be maneuvered. Around that time, Brandon started getting real friendly with me. And that's when I knew something was seriously off. Yo, Ethan, he said one morning, showing up unannounced at the accounting office. Got time for lunch? I blinked. Yeah, I guess. We went to this overpriced burger place nearby, and he kept the small talk light for a while, crypto, cars, this startup he might get in on. Then, like clockwork, he shifted. So, working with Uncle David, huh? Must be cool. But you see all kinds of numbers flying around. I played dumb. Yeah, lots of receipts and spreadsheets. Riveting stuff. He laughed, but there was tension behind it. But like, client accounts, right? Bank stuff? You ever see, like, family files? I just looked at him. Why? No reason, he said, too quickly, just curious. After that, I kept my answers short. We finished lunch, and I told him I had work to get back to. He didn't push, but I could feel it. He was testing the waters, seeing how much I knew, how much I might say. From then on, I started keeping records, screenshots, notes, email logs, just in case. Because something told me this wasn't just about snide comments at dinner anymore. This was a hunt. And I was the deer they thought was too slow to notice the wolves. Then came the missing money. Uncle David called me into his office one Friday afternoon. His face was pale, jaw tight. Ethan, he said, motioning for me to close the door. We're short. $25,000 from the retained earnings account. My heart skipped. What? How? He turned his screen toward me and pulled up the ledger. A withdrawal had been processed the day before, one that didn't match any of our scheduled transactions. I didn't do that, I said immediately. I know, David replied. You're not the only one with access, but you are the only one I know who checks twice before breathing. I looked closer. The authorization ID used matched my login, but I hadn't made the transfer. I wasn't even in the office that day. I had class until 3 and then worked remotely. David stared at the screen, then at me. This looks bad, he said, low and serious. I trust you, but if an audit happens, I'll need to show who used what credentials. I nodded, swallowing a rising panic. Can I see the security footage from that day? He hesitated. The office safe? That's a separate system. I don't have clearance to pull it, but we can request it. Do it, I said, voice tight. Please. He agreed, but it would take a few days. That weekend was unbearable. I kept imagining someone, my aunt, Brandon, slipping into the office, using my login somehow. But how would they get it? I never shared it. My password wasn't easy. And then it hit me. 2 weeks earlier, during a family dinner, Brandon had borrowed my laptop. Said he needed to send a quick email because his phone was dead. I handed it over without thinking. I was sitting right there, but I had been logged into the firm portal. If he checked. I spent the next 3 days obsessing over browser logs, timestamps, anything I could find. Meanwhile, the silence from Aunt Diane was deafening. Normally, she'd be texting Mom something passive-aggressive about how quiet I'd been lately, but no, nothing. Then, midweek, Uncle David called me. They reviewed the footage, he said. Come in tomorrow. I barely slept that night. When I arrived, David was waiting with a thumb drive. He didn't speak, just plugged it into the monitor and clicked play. It was black and white footage from the office hallway. Timestamp, 2 days ago. Around 11:26 a.m., a figure entered the frame, shorter than me, wearing a hoodie and baseball cap. But the walk, the way he glanced over his shoulder, unmistakable. It was Brandon. He moved quickly, punching in the safe room code like he'd done it 100 times, which was strange because the code changed monthly, and only a handful of people knew it. Uncle David and I included. David looked at me. How'd he know the code? I stared at the screen. I don't know. He paused the video. We have a problem. That evening, I sat across from Mom at the kitchen table. I showed her the footage. Her face was unreadable at first. Then the rage crept in, slow, simmering. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't cry. She just sat back and whispered, "She used to." We didn't say who. We didn't need to. The next day, we called a family meeting. Lucas came. Aunt Diane came. Brandon came. Mom set the laptop on the table and said one sentence that cracked the air like thunder: "Give back the $25,000 you stole or leave forever." Aunt Diane blinked. "Excuse me?" Lucas stood, backing Mom. "You heard her." Diane narrowed her eyes. "This is a setup. You've always hated my son." Mom didn't answer. She just hit play. The footage rolled in silence. At the 10-second mark, Brandon shifted in his chair. At 20 seconds, he swallowed. At 30, his foot tapped once against the floor. When the video ended, Mom looked up. "Do you want to explain?" Brandon didn't speak. But Diane scoffed. "This proves nothing. That could be anyone. Hoodies, baseball caps. It's practically a disguise." I slid a photo across the table, a still frame of Brandon's face as he turned toward the camera. You could see his profile clear as day. Her eyes flickered. That's when she leaned forward, voice low. "If you think this is over, you're wrong." And in that moment, I didn't just see a mother defending her son. I saw a woman who had built her whole life on manipulation, realizing the walls were starting to crack. I didn't respond. Not yet, because this wasn't the end. This was the beginning of something far more dangerous. The living room was quiet after Aunt Diane's threat. Not dramatic quiet, not shouting quiet, just still. The kind of stillness that feels too full, like everyone's holding their breath, and no one wants to be the first to blink. Brandon was slouched back on the couch, arms crossed, pretending to be bored, but his jaw was tight. And Diane, she wasn't even looking at the laptop anymore. She was staring directly at Mom, not blinking, like she was daring her to make the next move. Mom didn't, not right away. Instead, she closed the laptop gently, like the footage didn't matter anymore. Her eyes never left Diane's. "You want to make this a fight?" she said softly. "Fine, but don't lie to my face and pretend your son didn't steal from us." Diane scoffed, but her voice was colder now. "That footage proves nothing. There's no audio, no context. This could be a mistake or even a setup." Lucas leaned forward. "A setup? What, we deep-faked Brandon into the security footage? Come on. You always hated him," she snapped, her voice sharp now, rising. "Both of you. You've resented him since he was born because he was actually wanted." "Enough," Mom said. Her voice wasn't loud, but it cut through everything. The words hung there. Actually wanted. I blinked. It wasn't just an insult anymore. That was something else, something darker. "What does that mean?" I asked. Diane didn't answer. She just sat back, crossed her legs, and gave me a long, bitter smile. And that was when I felt it. Not confusion, not even anger, just a low, sinking dread, because something had shifted. That night, I went up to my room, but I didn't sleep. I kept thinking about that look in her eyes. Not just anger, not even fear. It was certainty. Like she still held cards we didn't know about. Like this wasn't the endgame, just a move in the middle of something much bigger. And I was right. 3 days later, I came home to find Mom sitting at the kitchen table, a white envelope in her hand, face pale. She looked up when I walked in, but didn't speak right away. She just slid the envelope across to me. Inside was a letter, legal stationery letterhead. I recognized Dad's old attorney. It was a formal notice, request for reassessment of family trust access and mismanagement of funds. Filed by Aunt Diane. She's accusing us? I asked slowly. Mom nodded, jaw tight. She's claiming we manipulated the trust, that we're hiding money, that you tampered with the accounts. My hands curled into fists. She's the one who stole. She knows, Mom said. She just doesn't care. She's playing the long game. And suddenly I got it. This wasn't about $25,000 anymore. This was about control, about tearing down everything she couldn't have. If she couldn't get access to what Grandpa left behind, she'd try to burn it all down. I started pacing. She can't prove anything. The footage alone, she doesn't have to prove anything, Mom cut in. She just has to raise enough doubt to trigger a formal audit. If that happens, everything gets frozen, the trust, my accounts, yours. The firm might even get pulled into it. That's what she wants. But why now? I asked. Why push this far? Mom sighed. Because I told her last month that I was changing the trust, that I'd be splitting it between you and Lucas only. I didn't tell her how much was left, but I made it clear Brandon wasn't getting a dime. And there it was. I sat down slowly. The pieces clicked into place one by one, and the picture wasn't just ugly. It was calculated. I looked at Mom. She's trying to ruin us. Yes, she said. And if we don't get ahead of it, she just might. That night, we called a meeting with Uncle David. We laid everything out, footage, the legal letter, the patterns of manipulation. David listened in silence, then leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temples. I knew she was bold, he muttered. But this? She wants a paper trail? I said she wants it to look like we're a problem. David nodded. I'll speak to my lawyers. But Ethan, you need to be careful. If she's using this much pressure, she's not done. He was right, because the next betrayal wasn't from her. It was from someone I trusted. Lucas. It started small. A weird comment here or there. He'd stop by the house and talk with Mom in the other room, voices hushed. When I'd walk in, they'd change the subject. At first, I assumed it was stress, that maybe they were just trying to keep me from worrying. But then one afternoon, I came home early from class and heard my name through the door. I'm just saying, if Ethan hadn't given him his login, this never would have happened. It was Lucas's voice. Mom responded, firm. He didn't give anyone his login. Brandon snooped. Don't twist it. Yeah, but come on. He let him use his laptop. What did he expect? I stood frozen. Mom defended me, but Lucas wasn't backing down. He's still a kid, Mom. He doesn't get how this stuff works. He's got no idea what kind of mess this is turning into. Don't do this, she said quietly. I'm just being real, he said. You're betting everything on someone who can't even legally drink yet. That one stung more than it should have. I stepped back before they saw me and went to the park for an hour just to breathe. When I got back, Lucas was gone. I confronted Mom that night. You didn't tell me he thinks it's my fault. She looked tired. He doesn't mean it like that. Yes, he does. She hesitated. Lucas is practical. He doesn't like chaos. He just wants this all to be over. Even if it means throwing me under the bus. Of course not. But her eyes didn't match her voice. That week, things got worse. Aunt Diane's lawyer sent another letter, this time requesting financial statements from the last 5 years. She wanted full access to anything connected to the trust. The implication was clear, she was preparing to sue. And then I got the email from Uncle David's firm. Subject: Credential Alert. Secondary login used. It listed a timestamp and IP address. I stared at it. It wasn't from Brandon's intrusion. It was recent. 2 days ago. Someone had used my backup credentials from inside the firm's network. I printed the report, heart pounding, and drove straight to Uncle David's office. He met me at the door, tense. I was just about to call you. We went to his computer and matched the access logs. Whoever it was had downloaded files from the firm's private folder labeled Trust Documents, Ethan/Mother. I looked at Uncle David. Who else has access? He hesitated. Aside from me and you, Lucas. It felt like the floor dropped out from under me. Lucas? He wouldn't. He doesn't even work here, I said, but my voice was thin now. He's used my terminal before, David said slowly. A few times. I didn't think anything of it. He said he was helping clean up documents for your mom. The rage came slow, cold. I left the office without saying much and drove home in silence. Lucas was there, feet up on the coffee table, phone in hand, like nothing was wrong. I held up the printed access report. Want to explain this? He looked up, blinked, didn't speak. You went into the trust folder, I said. You copied the files. Lucas set the phone down slowly. I didn't take anything. I just looked. Why? He didn't answer. Why? I repeated. He stood. Because I need to know what we're dealing with. I need to protect this family. And frankly, Ethan, you're not ready to handle all this. My hands were shaking now. You gave her something, didn't you? He flinched. You did? I said, breath catching. You gave her something from the files, something she could use. I didn't give her everything, he muttered. Just a summary. Just enough to keep her from escalating. You betrayed us, I said. You betrayed me. She's family, too, he snapped. You think this is black and white? You think you're the only one who matters here? I think I was the only one who didn't sell us out. He didn't speak. Didn't deny it. Didn't apologize. Just picked up his phone, walked out, and slammed the door. That night, I sat on the porch alone, staring into the dark. I wasn't just fighting Diane anymore. I was fighting my own brother. And I had no idea what he gave her. But I was going to find out. And when I did, I'd make sure the damage stopped with me. It's a strange thing when your world breaks apart quietly. No explosions, no dramatic exits, just a slow collapse. Like watching paint crack on a ceiling you thought was solid. After Lucas walked out, I sat there for hours. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't even feel angry. Not at first. I just felt hollow, like someone had scooped something out of me and left me standing there, pretending I was still whole. The next few days passed in a blur. People talk about hitting rock bottom like it's a moment, a single crash. But for me, it was a slow sinking. Every day, a little lower. Every morning, I checked my email with a pit in my stomach. Every call from the firm made my chest tighten. I started keeping my phone on silent because I couldn't bear the vibration anymore. It felt like a warning shot every time. Uncle David tried to keep me in the loop, but he was under pressure, too. The firm's partners had found out about the audit requests and the footage, and they were panicking. One of them, a gray-haired man named Richard, who always wore loafers without socks, pulled David into a meeting and told him flat out, "You bring that boy in again, you're dragging us all down with you." David didn't fire me, but he stopped copying me on emails, and that hurt more than I expected. I still showed up. I still worked. But I was invisible now. The kid who got his login stolen. The liability. The potential scandal. Meanwhile, at home, Mom was unraveling. Slowly. She tried to stay strong, cooking, folding laundry, keeping her tone calm. But I saw the bags under her eyes. I heard the way her voice caught sometimes when she thought I wasn't listening. She'd been holding this family together with duct tape and goodwill for years, and now everything was slipping out from under her. One night, I found her in the living room staring at an old photo of Grandpa. She didn't notice me at first. "He'd be ashamed of this," she said softly. "Of all of us." I sat down next to her and didn't say anything. A week later, the final blow came. The trust was officially frozen. Not permanently, but enough. The bank, after reviewing the conflicting claims and legal threats, issued a hold on the account, pending a full audit and resolution of disputed control. Which meant no access, no funds. No way for Mom to pay for the new roof we needed, no way to cover the medical bill for her blood pressure medication, which had gone up after her insurance change. No tuition support for my next semester. Nothing. We were locked out of her own father's legacy. And the worst part, Lucas didn't even come by. Not to check in, not to explain, not even to argue. Just vanished. I heard through a mutual friend that he and his girlfriend had moved forward with their condo purchase. Said something about starting fresh, clean break. I didn't know if that meant from Mom and me, or from the whole situation. It didn't matter. The damage was done. So, I did what I always did. I worked. I threw myself into code. I finished every freelance project I could find, web redesigns for local businesses, data scrubbing for a logistics firm, even some sketchy Excel automation jobs that paid well and asked no questions. I stopped sleeping more than 4 hours a night. I stopped replying to texts unless they were from clients. I just kept moving, because if I stopped, even for a second, I was afraid everything would collapse on top of me. And through it all, Aunt Diane stayed silent. She didn't show up, didn't call, didn't gloat. But I knew she was watching. I could feel it, like a shadow just out of view. Then one day, I found out why. I was delivering an invoice to a client in Chicago, a law firm that needed a document portal redesigned, when I ran into Brandon. Literally. He came around the corner of the building just as I was stepping out. We both froze. He was wearing a suit, slightly too large, probably borrowed. His face was clean-shaven. His hair slicked back. He looked smug. I gave him a nod, tried to step past, but he blocked my path. "You still doing the whole hardworking computer guy routine?" he asked, his voice dripping with fake innocence. "Excuse me?" I said, trying to brush past. But he wasn't done. "Mom says you're falling apart. That the trust got frozen. That must sting." I turned to face him fully. "Why are you here?" He smiled. "Client meeting. Some people actually respect my business ideas." I didn't reply. He leaned in slightly. "You know, Ethan, I didn't have to do any of this. You brought it on yourself. Always acting like you're better. Like you're the only one Grandpa would have wanted to leave things to." I stared at him. "I never said that." "You didn't have to," he said, smirking. "Everyone could tell. You and your little spreadsheets, your perfect GPA, your whole honor student with a heart of gold act. I clenched my fists. You stole from us. He shrugged. You can't steal what you were never going to get. It's just money, Ethan. You think you're the hero, but all you ever were was convenient. And with that, he walked past me into the building, whistling. I stood there for a long time, not angry, not broken, just cold. Because that was when it clicked. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't a family falling apart. This was war. And I'd been playing defense the whole time. I went home that night and started digging. Not emotionally, not philosophically. Technically. Brendan had always been slippery, vague business ventures, Instagram posts showing off rented cars, shady investments with zero paper trails. But now I had a reason to follow the trail. And I wasn't doing it for revenge. I was doing it to protect Mom, to protect what was left. I started with old messages, emails from him to me, to Mom, even social media DMs. I found patterns, phrases he reused, email signatures that looked professional but were riddled with inconsistencies. I ran his domains through public WHOIS lookups, tracked hosting providers, ran pings and DNS traces. One domain, supposedly the site for his tech startup, had been registered under a fake name. But the IP history showed a different story. It had once been hosted on a private server, the same block of IPs used by a small co-working space in Boston. I recognized the name. It was where he'd once asked me to help set up his email months ago, back when we were still family. I kept going. I called in favors from old classmates, people working in IT and cybersecurity. I didn't tell them why, just said I needed help tracking some digital footprints for a client. And what I found, it wasn't just shady, it was criminal. Fake investors, inflated revenue reports, dummy accounts showing money that never existed. And best of all, the kicker was a ledger file, poorly hidden, but there, with a line item labeled FT transfer, safe withdrawal, $25K, time-stamped exactly 2 days before the trust freeze. I didn't know how he got the code. Not yet. But I knew now that he logged the theft in his own system. Maybe he thought it was clever. Maybe he thought no one would ever find it. He was wrong. I compiled everything, saved it to a secure drive, set up an encrypted backup on a cloud server under a pseudonym, and then I waited. Because the next time he or Diane came sniffing around, I wanted to be ready. But I also knew something else. This wasn't enough. This wasn't just about proving they were liars. This was about showing them I'd stopped playing by their rules. That I wasn't the quiet, harmless kid anymore. I was walking away from the wreckage of our family. But I wasn't walking empty-handed, and the next move would be mine. I didn't plan for things to change overnight. I just planned for them to stop falling apart. But the strange thing about rock bottom is that once you're there, really there, bruised and burned and stripped down to your last nerve, every small win feels like a handhold. And eventually, you start to climb. I was still working 16-hour days, still eating microwaved rice and eggs 4 nights a week. Still dodging Mom's worried glances and Lucas's silence like landmines. But I had something now, a direction, a mission, a feeling I hadn't had in months. Leverage. I started with the portfolio, the fake one. Not to deceive, but to protect. I built a new personal website. Simple, clean, but loaded with the right keywords: freelance tech consultant, data security specialist, discreet project handling. I wasn't lying. Not really. Everything I was doing, tracing Brendan's shady business dealings, following his digital paper trail, organizing evidence, was in its own weird way a kind of consultation. I just wasn't billing him for it. I posted the site to a few private Discord groups, some freelancer networks, and even an anonymous subreddit I used to lurk in during college. I made a fake testimonial or two to get it rolling. And within a week, I had my first client, a small e-commerce site owner who'd been hacked and needed help recovering their customer list. I charged him $500. He paid in 24 hours. That money didn't solve everything, but it did something else. It reminded me that I wasn't helpless. I wasn't stuck waiting for Diane to make the next move or Lucas to crawl back with half an apology. I had skills. I had evidence. And I had time. With the audit still pending, the trust account frozen, and Mom's retirement plans in limbo, I knew I couldn't fix everything at once. But I could build something real, something mine. So, I did. By the end of the month, I had 4 clients. 2 were basic data cleanup jobs. 1 was a small business that wanted to migrate to a secure invoicing platform. And 1, a big one, was a former startup CEO who needed help scrubbing his name from a very public scandal involving stolen crypto. I charged him $2,000. He didn't blink. It wasn't glamorous work. Half of it was automated. The other half was research, scripts, and staying up late on forums figuring out how to bypass third-party caches. But it paid more than that. It gave me control. And the whole time I kept tabs on Brendan, quietly. He'd gone quiet on social media. No more flashy dinners or cryptic big things coming soon tweets. That alone was suspicious. He wasn't the type to go dark unless something was brewing or unless he'd been told to lay low. I cross-referenced the accounts he still had active. Ran his email through a breached database and found a string of matching usernames tied to an obscure crypto marketplace registered offshore. I couldn't get access to the wallet transactions directly, but I flagged a few of the pseudonyms and tracked them across different forums. One of them, Z3Virus, posted on a Black Hat message board asking for help laundering large amounts of USDT through NFTs. The kicker? They posted a screenshot. It was cropped carefully, but not carefully enough. The top corner showed a timestamp that matched the exact hour Brendan had left the co-working space last month. I archived the thread, saved everything, took screenshots, and even recorded a short screen capture scrolling through the discussion just in case it got wiped later. This was bigger than I thought. He wasn't just stealing from family. He was laundering money. Meanwhile, life at home shifted, too. Mom was still quiet, but she walked lighter now. She didn't say much, but she noticed the way our bills started getting paid early. The way I offered to cover groceries without hesitation. The way I installed a better security system in the house and upgraded our Wi-Fi without asking for permission. She didn't question it. She just looked at me one night while we were eating, her hand wrapped around a warm mug of tea, and said, "You're not a kid anymore, are you?" I smiled. Not for a long time. She nodded once, slowly, and didn't say anything else. But I saw the corners of her eyes crease the way they used to when she was proud of me as a kid. That was worth more than anything I'd earned online. But the real turning point came when I got a call from someone I hadn't spoken to in weeks. Lucas. It was short. He didn't apologize, didn't explain, just asked if I was home. Said he needed to talk. He came by later that night, looking older somehow. Not tired, just subdued. Like someone who realized too late that the bridge he burned wasn't as far behind him as he thought. He sat at the kitchen table. Same spot where everything had started. Same spot where the $25,000 was first brought up. "I messed up," he said. I waited. I thought I was protecting Mom. Thought if I gave Diane something, just something small, she'd back off. She said all she wanted was clarity, just enough to make sure you weren't manipulating things. I stayed quiet. But that wasn't true, he added. She twisted it. Used it to claim Mom was hiding money, that you forged documents. She's pushing for full control now of the trust. Of everything. I looked at him. Expression blank. Why are you telling me this now? Because I found out what she's doing. What Brandon's doing. He pulled a USB from his pocket and slid it across the table. I didn't mean to spy, he said. But I started checking some of the files I shared with her. One of them had metadata linking back to a crypto wallet. I followed it. It's Brandon's, and it's bad. I didn't pick up the USB. I didn't need to. I already know, I said. Lucas blinked. What? I've been tracking him for a month. He leaned back, eyes wide. You what? I nodded. I have everything. Every fake domain, every shell company, every wallet he used to move the money. I have proof that he took the $25,000, laundered it through a fake NFT exchange, then moved it offshore. Lucas just stared at me. Why didn't you say anything? He asked finally. I gave him a long look. Because you didn't trust me. He looked down. Guilty. I was scared. I know, I said. But fear doesn't excuse betrayal. I didn't mean to betray you. But you did. The silence stretched again. Finally, he said, so what now? I took a breath. I'm not just going to expose them, I said. I'm going to bury them. Legally, publicly, permanently. Lucas looked nervous. You're sure? I'm done being the quiet one, the background character, the good kid everyone underestimates. He didn't respond, and honestly, I didn't need him to. That night, I stayed up building something new, a secure, hidden database accessible only by encrypted key. I uploaded everything I had. Documents, footage, transactions, forum screenshots, metadata, testimonials, witness logs. I created a master folder and labeled it Operation Dustpan because I wasn't just going to sweep up this mess. I was going to clean house. And for the first time in months, I slept easy. Because for once, I wasn't reacting, I was preparing. And this time, I wouldn't just survive. I'd win. The next few weeks felt like living in the eye of a storm. Outwardly, everything seemed calm. But underneath the surface, I was quietly laying the foundation for something that would change everything. The chaos surrounding the frozen trust, the lawsuit threats, and Brandon's theft had put me through every emotional wringer possible: anger, guilt, grief, helplessness. But now, I felt something I hadn't felt in months: clarity. I was no longer reacting to their moves. I was building my own. I called it Operation Dustpan half-jokingly. But it became more than just a clever name. It became my blueprint for burning down everything Aunt Diane and Brandon had built on lies. First, I needed someone who could take this from a digital dossier to a legal weapon. That meant finding a lawyer. Not just any lawyer, but someone sharp enough to understand both family law and digital fraud. Uncle David had a few connections he trusted. And one name came up more than once: Darla Penrose. I met Darla on a rainy Tuesday in a modest office above a dental clinic. She didn't look like the high-powered attorneys I'd imagined. No power suits, no dramatic hair flip, just a practical bob, a pressed blouse, and a voice like steel wrapped in velvet. She listened as I explained everything. The theft, the audit, the family drama, the manipulation. When I got to the part about Brandon laundering money through NFTs, she held up a hand. You have proof? I nodded. All backed up, cross-referenced, time-stamped. I've got screen captures, access logs, forum threads, even wallet activity with his initials coded into the metadata. Her eyes lit up, just slightly. And you've stored this securely? Multiple encrypted backups. One local, one in the cloud under a dummy shell, one printed and locked in a fireproof safe. Now, she smiled just a little. You're not just smart, Ethan. You're dangerous. She agreed to take the case, not just to help my mom recover control of the trust, but to prepare a formal fraud complaint against Brandon, possibly even a civil suit if the funds couldn't be returned quietly. But that wasn't the most interesting part, because as we dug deeper, Darla discovered something unexpected. While researching the trust documents Lucas had shared with Aunt Diane, she found a clause tucked deep into the original estate planning papers. It was old, drafted decades ago by Grandpa when he first established the trust. It read like boilerplate legalese, but the implications were huge. The clause stated that if any named beneficiary were found guilty of criminal behavior, specifically involving family assets, their share of the trust would be forfeit. Gone. Null and void. That meant if we could prove Brandon stole from the trust, even just the $25,000, that would legally disqualify him from ever inheriting another cent. And here's the kicker: if a disqualification occurred, that beneficiary's share would automatically be redistributed evenly among the remaining parties. Which meant if Brandon went down, his slice would go back to Mom and Uncle David. I stared at the clause, stunned. This changes everything, I said. Darla nodded. Exactly. Diane is fighting tooth and nail for access, but she doesn't realize her son is the ticking time bomb that could cost her everything. For the first time in a long time, I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was poetic. And we weren't done. Darla had connections to a small but fierce investigative firm, retired analysts, forensic accountants, and one former IRS fraud investigator. She brought them in for a 2-week dig, and what they found turned Operation Dustpan from a cleanup into a full demolition. Brandon had done this before, not on the same scale and not to family. But 2 years ago, while supposedly working on a startup, he had funneled money from a college friend's seed investment into a fake consulting company that didn't exist. The friend never pressed charges. Rumor was Diane paid him off to keep it quiet. But the paper trail was still there: bank transfers, invoices, matching IP addresses. We had it all. But I didn't want to go nuclear just yet. Not until we knew exactly what Diane was planning. So, I took a risk. I contacted someone I hadn't spoken to in years, Chloe, my cousin on my dad's side. She worked at a legal firm that occasionally crossed paths with high-net-worth estate cases. I didn't think she was close to Diane, but I knew she had contacts who were. I met her for coffee under the pretense of catching up. We talked about life, about Dad, gone almost 10 years now, about the mess the family had become. I never outright asked her to spy, but she read between the lines. "You want to know what's being said behind closed doors?" she said. I didn't answer. She leaned in, voice low. "Well, here's what I've heard. Diane's lawyer is trying to position her as co-trustee. If she succeeds, she gets immediate access to records, voting power over the distribution, and the ability to freeze accounts herself. No court required." My blood ran cold. "She could lock us out completely?" I asked. Chloe nodded. "It's a long shot, but not impossible, especially if Lucas supports her." He wouldn't, but I didn't finish the sentence, because I wasn't sure anymore. That night, I called Darla and relayed everything. She paused on the line, then said, "If she gets co-trustee status, we're back at square one. We need to move faster." And so we did. By now, I had turned my freelance side hustle into a full-time consulting pipeline. Clients were referring others. One crypto project even offered me equity in exchange for a security audit, which I accepted. I started stacking funds in a separate account under a newly registered LLC, Dustpan Digital Solutions. I had leverage. I had funding. I had a paper trail leading straight to Brandon's corruption and a legal team ready to present it. But I needed one final piece. Something that would not just expose Brandon, but pull Diane into the spotlight with him. And as it turns out, Brandon gave it to me without even realizing. I was combing through old group chat logs, back when we were all in a family WhatsApp group, mostly sharing birthday invites and memes, when I found something odd, a PDF sent by Brandon about a year ago titled family_docs.pdf. I had ignored it at the time. Probably thought it was a flyer or something trivial. But I opened it now and nearly dropped my coffee. It was a scanned copy of an old tax return, but not his. It was Mom's. Her full name, social security number, and earnings. A full breakdown of deductions and asset holdings. Attached. In a group chat. He had deleted the message minutes later, probably realized what he'd done. But I had downloaded it. And even though I didn't remember doing so, my archive folder had the original file. I ran metadata and found the smoking gun. The original file wasn't scanned by Brandon. It was scanned on Diane's printer. Her name, her IP. Even the model of the printer was embedded in the file's metadata. That's when it all clicked. They'd been digging into Mom's records for months before the trust fight started. This wasn't desperation. This wasn't panic. It was premeditated. Diane had accessed Mom's personal records without permission, and Brandon had used them to build their case. That was illegal in multiple ways. And now I had proof. I emailed Darla the file. 5 minutes later, she called me. Her voice was electric. "This is it," she said. "This is your hammer." I nodded. "So, what do we do next?" She smiled. "Now we show them what happens when you back the quiet kid into a corner." And just like that, Operation Dustpan shifted into its final phase. Because this wasn't just setup anymore. This was checkmate in motion. I didn't announce the revenge. I didn't post a cryptic "they'll regret crossing me" message. I didn't even tell Mom what I was about to do, because this wasn't about theatrics. It was about justice. It was about precision. And it started with a letter, not from me, but from Darla. Certified, formal, strategically timed. Diane and her attorney received it on a Tuesday morning. The letter opened with a calm, professional tone, almost sterile. It acknowledged their petition to claim co-trustee status of the family trust and outlined the upcoming hearing date. But that wasn't the important part. The important part was the attached notice of pending fraud investigation, complete with digital evidence logs, metadata forensics, and a formal declaration from the cybersecurity team detailing Brandon's involvement in laundering the stolen $25,000. It included footage of Brandon entering the safe room, system logs showing access to my login credentials, records of offshore crypto wallets traced to his digital alias, screenshots of the NFT laundering scheme, and most damningly, the group chat PDF with Mom's tax records scanned from Diane's own printer. It was a legal shot across the bow. But that wasn't the real play. 3 hours after Diane received the letter, Darla filed a request for disqualification of beneficiary, citing Clause 9b of Grandpa's Trust, the clause that stated any beneficiary proven to have committed criminal or unethical activity involving trust funds would be permanently removed and their portion redistributed to the remaining heirs. Brandon was the first domino, but we weren't done. At the same time, Darla submitted a formal cease and desist against Diane herself for illegal access to private tax documents, citing potential violations of federal privacy laws and interference with estate proceedings. And then, just for good measure, we had the letter forwarded to the bank holding the trust, the firm reviewing the audit, the partners at Uncle David's company, and Lucas. Not out of spite. Out of strategy. Because silence gives power to manipulators. But transparency, that's where they collapse. The fallout started fast. First, the bank issued a formal hold on Diane's petition for co-trustee status, citing pending legal investigation. That meant she could no longer poke around inside the trust or request records. Second, her attorney, clearly blindsided, called Darla and tried to bluff. "This is all circumstantial," he said. Darla replied with 5 words that made me wish I'd been there to see it: "We welcome the criminal trial." 2 days later, Diane fired him. By the end of the week, the bank initiated a forensic audit, but not of my mom, of Brandon. And that's when the cracks turned into fractures. We didn't hear from them directly, but the signals were there. Brandon deleted his Twitter account. His car, which had been leased under one of his shell companies, was repossessed. And that startup he'd been bragging about? It vanished. Overnight. The domain expired. Socials gone. No forwarding page, just a dead site with a 403 error. Then came the phone call. I was sitting in my room finishing up a project for one of my new clients, a subscription box brand that needed a payment security upgrade, when my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost let it go to voicemail, but I picked up. It was Brandon. His voice was strained, edgy, like someone trying to sound calm while their house burned down around them. "Ethan," he said, "we need to talk." I said nothing. "I know you're behind this," he continued, "the footage, the logs, the IRS guy breathing down my neck. You think you've won, but you don't know what you're playing with." I stayed silent. He grew more desperate. "You don't want to go to war with our family, Ethan. You think this makes you some kind of hero?" That's when I spoke. Calm, even. "I'm not a hero, Brandon. I'm the guy who got tired of letting you walk all over the people who actually cared about this family." He exhaled sharply. "Do you know what you've done? You've ruined me." I didn't flinch. "I didn't ruin you. You did that yourself." Then I hung up. I thought that would be the end of it. But it wasn't, because the final twist hadn't landed yet. 2 weeks later, Darla called with something new. The forensic audit had turned up unreported income in Brandon's name. Income that couldn't be explained by freelance gigs or consulting work. It matched the stolen trust funds almost exactly. What made it worse, that income had been transferred through an account partially owned by Diane. That was the final nail. Diane was no longer just guilty by association. She was implicated. Darla filed a motion for permanent removal of trustee candidate and attached the full audit report. Within a week, the bank confirmed. Brandon was removed from the trust entirely. His share was redistributed, 50% to Mom, 50% to Uncle David. Diane's petition was denied indefinitely, and all future trust oversight would be handled by a neutral third-party firm, at Brandon and Diane's expense. Mom didn't gloat. She didn't cry either. She just sat in the garden that afternoon, watching the wind move through the trees, and said, "Your grandfather would be proud of you." And for the first time since this all began, I believed her. But there was one last thing, something I'd waited to do until the dust had settled. I called Lucas. He didn't answer, so I left a voicemail. "Hey, I don't know where we stand. But I thought you should know. Mom's safe. The trust is secure. Brandon and Diane won't be touching it again. I'm not calling to fight. I just wanted you to know that it's over, and we're okay." I don't know if he ever listened to it. I don't need to, because this revenge, it wasn't about getting even. It was about getting free. And we were finally free. Almost. But there was one last conversation that needed to happen. And I knew exactly where to have it, in person, with the woman who started it all. Aunt Diane. Because before I walked away for good, she needed to hear it from me. And what I had to say was going to leave her speechless. I decided to meet Aunt Diane face to face. Not for drama, not to yell or gloat or rub salt into the wounds she and Brandon had inflicted. I just needed her to see what it looked like when her schemes failed. When the quiet kid she overlooked, dismissed, mocked, underestimated, stared her down with nothing left to lose and everything left to protect. She agreed to the meeting surprisingly quickly. Maybe she thought she still had some kind of upper hand. Maybe she assumed I'd come crawling, asking for peace. Maybe she believed the story she'd always told herself, that she was the center of this family, and we were just orbiting her. We met at a cafe in Denver, one of those posh, minimalist places with recycled wood tables and overpriced scones. She arrived 10 minutes late in a beige trench coat and sunglasses, like she was auditioning for a spy movie. "No, Brandon." She sat across from me and didn't smile. "You look tired," she said. I didn't respond. She pulled off her sunglasses slowly. Her eyes were sharp, but different now. Not smug, not condescending. Cautious. "You wanted to talk?" she asked. I nodded, took out my phone, and slid it across the table. The screen was paused on a video file, one of the dozens we'd gathered during the investigation. It was the footage of Brandon entering the safe room at Uncle David's office. Clear as day, time-stamped, irrefutable. I hit play. She didn't flinch, just watched, jaw tight. When it ended, I said, "You knew." She didn't deny it. Instead, she crossed her arms and leaned back. "You're very proud of yourself, aren't you?" "No," I said, "but I'm proud of Mom. She never deserved what you did to her. The lies, the sabotage, the invasion of her privacy. And the worst part, you involved your son in it. You turned him into your weapon." She looked away. "I didn't turn him into anything," she muttered. "He made his own choices." I leaned forward. "So did you." A pause. Then she said, "Do you think this is justice, Ethan? You think cutting us out of the trust, humiliating us, ruining our names? You think any of that makes you better than us?" "I don't care if I'm better," I said. "I care that you can't harm us anymore." Her mouth opened, then shut again. I could see her fighting for something to say. A counter. A defense. Nothing came. "You'll lose everything," she said, finally quiet now. "That money, those assets, you think they'll protect you? It never ends with money. It never ends with winning. Sooner or later, someone will come for you, Ethan." I smiled, not because I was amused, but because I'd finally understood her. She wasn't angry because she lost. She was terrified because someone like me, a quiet, polite, overlooked kid, had the power to take her down. She wasn't used to losing control. And now she had none. "No one's coming for me," I said. Because I didn't lie. I didn't steal. I didn't manipulate anyone. I stood up and slid the phone back into my pocket. "I came here to say goodbye," I added. "You and Brandon, you're done. He's being investigated for fraud. You've been barred from touching the trust ever again. You'll probably get a fine for violating federal privacy laws. Maybe worse." She swallowed hard, but her face stayed frozen. "You think you won because you get to keep the money?" she asked bitterly. "No," I said, "I won because we finally got you out of our lives." She didn't reply. I turned and walked out, and I didn't look back. The fallout came fast. Brandon was formally charged with wire fraud and unlawful access to financial systems. Turns out, one of his dummy crypto wallets had been flagged on a watch list months ago, and Darla's report gave investigators the push they needed. He didn't end up in prison. Not yet. But he was slapped with over $60,000 in restitution, banned from opening any new business accounts, and forced to settle privately with multiple investors he duped. One of them, ironically, was the same college friend Diane had paid off 2 years prior. That one came back with interest. Diane didn't escape unscathed. She was fined for unlawful access to private tax records and permanently barred from serving on any family-controlled assets, trusts, or estate matters. Her social reputation gone. Word spread quietly but effectively through the family network. She stopped getting invites to weddings, holidays, reunions. Uncle David cut ties. Her own sister, my mom, never spoke to her again. And Lucas? He came back. Not with an apology at first, but with silence. He started showing up again, offering to help around the house, bringing groceries, picking up Mom's prescriptions. Trying to fix what he'd broken, not with words, but with actions. It took time, but eventually we talked. And when we did, I didn't say, "I told you so." I just said, "Next time, trust me." And he nodded. Mom's life finally settled. She kept her half of the trust, used some of it to pay off the house, gave the rest to a financial advisor, and took a real vacation for the first time in decades. She came back tan, rested, and lighter than I'd seen her in years. As for me, I built Dustpan Digital into a real business. I took on better clients, hired a part-time developer, and moved into a small office near campus. The same people who once saw me as just a kid were now asking me for security consultations, project audits, and long-term contracts. I wasn't the background character anymore. I was the one writing the script. A few months later, I got one final message. A short email, no subject line, from Brendan to me. Body, you were never supposed to be the one to win. Enjoy it while it lasts. I didn't reply. I didn't need to, because I was enjoying it. Not the money, not the revenge, but the silence, the peace, the safety, the knowledge that no one was going to harm my mom again, that no one was ever going to make me doubt myself again, and that sometimes the quiet kid wins. What would you have done in my shoes?